on that's in that broad group. So you have to, kind of just see that it's more or less an overview of what has been known to happen, and then also hopefully what we'll be able to do a little bit of trial work next year. All of you wrote some great questions in. Some of them were directly about one of the WinField products, but it also gave us some really good ideas on work we're going to try and do in the next year, hopefully. Well, I don't know how I'm going to, there, okay, fine. Like I said, it's bizarre. You can do these types of talks for a long time and not know what the heck you're doing. This, I'm not even positive I'm showing you the right one. How about that for bizarre? We have covered this thing. I'm getting out of this because that isn't the right talk. How about that? That is so ridiculous. Let me see if I've got the right one on this computer. God. An embarrassment to you guys, huh? This is what happens, Adam. You gave me so many good ideas on different renditions, and it looks to me like I have got the wrong one on here. Let me see if I've got a newer one.
So if you need me to buy some time and get
fill in, tell us some stuff about yours while I try and find the correct talk.
Well, I failed to mention that, by the way, any Gravity 38 special purchase after Ann's talk here through the month and definitely during EOP season will receive a $25 gift card for every case. So a little something we got going and thought maybe be of interest here as Ann's trial work looks pretty good. Along with many other, I've already seen it, looks awesome. I think it's going to provide some value for everyone here from across the country. So. And you showed it to me earlier.
I know. I've got, it's just, well, I'm getting old. I'll use that for an excuse, besides the fact I'm clearly not competent to do this. This is amazing. Anyway, you'd think I could manage this by now, wouldn't you? I just realized I didn't thank who I was going to thank. So, okay. Gosh. It's really kind of outrageous and embarrassing.
No worries, Ann. No worries.
Well, this was almost as good. I'll tell you a story where I try and do two things at once, and I'm not great at that, but I tried to. I gave a talk. One of the first ones I ever gave at University of Florida was to the Tropical Foliage Industry Expedition. And I'll tell you something, that was a big, big deal. 300 or 400 people in the audience. And I had put all the slides in upside down. Very consistently, every slide was in there upside down. So the person running the slide projector thought they'd help me. And they turned the carousel over and dumped them all on the floor. So now, as you can imagine, you find out real fast that you can actually give a talk with no slides. Yeah, I'm really kind of, I'll go for embarrassed when I manage to get this talk up here. Oh, brother. Yeah, I took it out of the wrong folder. Let's see if I can get my computer to open it now. Now, I apologize for wasting your time. Maybe some of you guys had a chance to get on here since I messed this up temporarily. No, that's the same one. Let's see if I've. All right, we're gonna just do this. Okay, sorry about that, guys. You still see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, maybe I'll go ahead and try and play it then. All right, so the topics that we're gonna cover today, I'm going to show you some of the research that was done really quite a long time ago with powdery mildew control and how adjuvants can improve that or not. Rust diseases, Pythium root rot, so that's in the case of adding something to a drench in a lot of cases. And then looking at a lot of different things, additives for foliar disease control and also for soil-borne disease control, and how does that impact which ones you might pick and whether or not they really do you any good. And in a general way, we want to cover at the very end, what else can phosphonates do for you? And because they're not just exactly for what we're going to talk about today, they actually have a broader spectrum than that. Now, this is one of the first trials we did quite a few years ago when we were working in California. And essentially what we were finding out, if you looked at just two different rating dates, the dark purple bar is how many colonies were on the Gerber daisies with powdery mildew, and just looking at an organosilicate. That's it. No fungicides added to this. What we see is a little bit of a reduction at a 1 ounce per 100 rate, but when we get to the 4 ounces per 100, which was within the label on that organosilicate, we actually saw pretty good disease control. Not as good as Eagle, which is your true fungicide control here. So you're actually seeing that, at least in the case of this trial, an adjuvant all by itself was somewhat effective in controlling powdery mildew on Gerber daisies. So let's look at another one. In this case, we have different products here. We did happen to have capsule in the trial. Again, this happens to be rosemary, and we're trying to wipe out powdery mildew as opposed to preventing it. Heritage being a very, very good control by itself. Capsule, we got just a little bit of control. There was a spreader sticker product in the trial where we got much better control. And then finally, a product that could be described as a wetter spreader type product. That actually was excellent. It was every bit as good as the fungicide. So in general, on powdery mildew, adding an adjuvant definitely improves it. And this was a summary of the work that was done up until the time when I gave this talk, which is, believe it or not, 15 years ago. But we looked at, I'm giving you the fungicides we looked at, they definitely, every single one in this column in the middle, from Trinity Insignia, which is now a part of Pageant, Compass O, Heritage, and again, Trinity, we saw that when we added any adjuvant that we happened to test, whether it was a wetting agent or not, we actually improved control. The trials, we had trials on crepe myrtle, Gerber daisy, hydrangea, and roses. So this is a pretty consistent result for powdery mildew. So the answer to the question is, should you put adjuvants into fungicide sprays if you're trying to fight powdery mildew? Yeah, absolutely. And do you guys have any kind of questions, say, on a powdery mildew situation? All right, well, we'll have a chance later to have other questions too. Let's go on and look at rust diseases. Now, rust diseases are quite different organisms. They're both fungi, but they're still different organisms, and the responses cannot be expected to be identical. So we did the same kinds of trials. This is two different rating dates here. And what we saw is that the capsule by itself did give us some control, but Eagle was better. See, Eagle, in this case, we had a 0 here. And then adding the capsule to pyraclostrobin, which is one of the active ingredients in Pageant, what we see there is that we definitely get an improvement. So as you look at this orange bar, that's capsule by itself. And then we have Eagle by itself and Eagle plus capsule, giving us absolutely 100% control. And then it definitely made these other two products work better. So the lower the bars are here, the better we are. Let's look at another rust trial. In this particular one, it's a lot of it being done again on Hypericum, which is used in California quite a lot as a cut foliage or cut flower, but it's also quite a popular ground cover in some parts of the country. So the products alone, we've got Compass doing a very good job. Pageant maybe a little bit better. Heritage, these are 3 strobilurins. And Palladium, not too inspiring. Palladium is not effective on rust. So what happens when you use the product alone? Those are the bars we're looking at now. And then if you add the spreader sticker, in this case, it was that. It was not a wetting agent. We have better control for Compass, the same control for Pageant, and better control for Heritage. What it starts to show you is that the exact active ingredient makes a difference, as well as the disease. And we also did a trial, another rust disease, a different one in this case on Bellis. This is the only rust disease I've ever seen that can kill the host, and it does. It just wipes Bellis out when it gets going. In this case, we're trying to eradicate the disease. And what you can see here is the water, everything started off about the same by the first rating. Now, this was after the trial started. Eagle did, some reduction. The pyraclostrobin, which again is partly or part of pageant, the pyraclostrobin plus the adjuvant and the adjuvant alone. So here's a case where the adjuvant alone was effective initially, but here's the final results. We see Eagle by itself doing a very good job, pyraclostrobin by itself. In this case, it was not quite as good as the Eagle, but very close. When we added the adjuvant to it, it was better than the same rate of the product with the wetting agent or the adjuvant in this case. How about, did the adjuvant work by itself? Nope. I have not found any trials that come to mind where a rust disease was wiped out just by an adjuvant, unlike the situation with powdery mildew, which we do see adjuvants themselves, especially wetting agents, control powdery mildew diseases. Now, our most recent trial that we were able to complete was helped sponsored by WinField. And we were looking at adding Droplex to a couple of different fungicides for a snapdragon rust trial. It was preventative. And we decided to try Mural by itself and then plus Droplex, TerraGuard by itself at a couple of different rates, and then TerraGuard plus Droplex. This last one is TerraGuard at 4 ounces. So it's a lower rate than the highest rate that we have here in the trial, and then 2 different rating dates. What we saw was that Mural works so well on rust that there's hardly any benefit to adding a wetting agent. We found that quite a few times with that active ingredient of azoxystrobin, which happens to be the same thing that's in Heritage. But, the fact is we had a tiny bit of rust on the Mural by itself, and then with the Droplex added, we had none. But the really important point, I think, of this one is the TerraGuard by itself at 4 ounces was an average of 10 rust pustules per plant. The TerraGuard with the Droplex at 4 ounces was almost 100% control. So what we're seeing is we're actually getting as good a control with a 4 ounce rate of TerraGuard if Droplex was added as we did when we used 8 ounces of TerraGuard. So as far as I can tell, there's some benefit here to not using quite as much of the fungicide in some cases and being able to still get very, very good control, but also the possibility that you might be able to save some money. So the picture of summary that we have from the rust diseases isn't the same. You remember the powdery mildew, every single thing we tested it, adding a wetting agent or an adjuvant rather, gave us better control. In the case of rust diseases, that's not true. Now, what we did find in this one case right here, rust disease, trying to wipe it out on Hypericum, was that we did not have a benefit of adding the wetting agent or the adjuvant to the insignia. There was no benefit to adding it because there was absolutely no control to begin with. So insignia did not prove to be effective in this trial at all. So adding a wetting agent to something that is not going to work in the first place is not going to magically make it work. The other thing is that when you take another similar trial with pageant, now it's got half of the same thing in it and something else that the insignia does. But we also, in this case, did not have any benefit. So no increased benefit. And that's because the pageant by itself was excellent. So the fact is, if you are working in an area where you have fungicides that either are on one extreme or the other, they either are pretty poor on a disease or they are absolutely excellent on the disease, you may not see a benefit of adding an adjuvant. But anytime you're in the more middle ground, you are seeing some benefit. This is just the summary of the Droplex trial at the very bottom here. With Mural at 2 ounces, we did see slight improvement. And that's basically the same case as it works so darn well by itself that you're just not going to pick up a lot better control. And then compare that to the TerraGuard where we saw pretty good control, but we can use a much lower rate and have it be equal to twice as much TerraGuard. So that is an important point based on rust diseases. So let's see, what's the answer to it? Yes, you should add adjuvants for rust disease control. And there's a few different reasons. The first one is it's absolutely critical in a curative situation. So if you already have rust and you spray a rust pustule with anything that you haven't gotten a penetrant or some kind of wetting agent with the fungicide, you may never actually contact the rust. And if you don't contact the rust, you're not killing it. So we've seen that show up several times in looking at heritage, which is great on rust. You can spray it all you want. If you actually don't get the heritage into the rust pustule, it doesn't matter. It rolls right off. It's like a little pile of powder there with all those spores. But the minute we added an adjuvant, then we could kill the rust. So it's a matter of actual penetration, which it clearly is one of the big benefits that you get with the adjuvants being used. It's also whether or not you should use it is dependent on the efficacy of the fungicide, which I just said. If it doesn't work at all, don't bother thinking that adding something to it is going to magically make it work. And if it's absolutely great, it may not show you a benefit either, because by itself it's great. And then finally, you actually might be able to get a reduction in the fungicide rate, which if you're using some of the newer fungicides, it might be reasonably costly. So it could be a good way to be more cost effective and still get very good control. So have I got any questions on rust diseases? And so I see a Q&A up there in the little bitty box. Have you ever found that if you use Droplex with fungicides, you get a low? Okay, so I think I answered it, huh? I did get around to that finally. So I've seen that. I hope we're going to get to do more things like that, but I've got to make sure I don't pick excellent products. I need to pick very good products when I do these comparisons at different rates. So yeah, I expect that we're going to see more of that. Thanks a lot, Eric. So let's look at the next section. In this case, I'm not showing you any of the trials. I'm just going to show you the summary of it. We did a lot of research on downy mildew diseases. We looked at things that are just contact products like Protect, Mancozeb, Daconel, maybe doing a pretty good job in some cases. We looked at some systemic products like Heritage. And when we added, notice I managed to do every color I could think of over here. When we added the one of the adjuvants to these active ingredients, in the case of this snapdragon trial, we had actually less control. Okay, so it took it away. It basically moved the product from where it needed to be. Although interestingly enough, we had better control the next time. So if you go up and down here, and we have about every kind of result you could think of for downy mildews. Part of the reason that that is the case is because downy mildews can be systemic. If you're systemic and you actually need to have the product on the inside of the plant and you stick it to the outside, like you could take a spreader sticker and stick Heritage to the outside, you could make it not work. You could absolutely make it impossible because you have made it so it won't move where it needs to go. So that is a complication for the downy mildews. So should you use adjuvants for downy mildew? Maybe. I don't know when to guess to tell you to do that, though, to tell you the truth. There's just not enough research, and I think it'll be tied 100% to the exact plant and the kind of downy mildew it has, and also to the fungicide. So any questions on the downy mildews? I'd say that those were the three biggest groups of research that we were able to conduct, in addition to the root disease information that I'll move on to when you guys are ready. All right, let's go ahead and go. One of the things that's, it's kind of hard to keep up with how people decide they're going to market things, but it's important for you to remember Clean Grow is a disinfectant, fungicide, bactericide, algicide, all that stuff. It's also sold as uptake as an adjuvant because it's a very good wetting agent. So we did a trial looking at Clean Grow and mainly Subdue Max in this particular trial. And we had it in an ebb and flood situation, little benches that we had when we worked in California. And then we had the exact same trial on the bench that was hand watered just to see how things were going to go. And the most bizarre thing about this trial is it turned out that my Pythium that I gave to these plants was resistant to Subdue Max. So as a product, that can't work because the fungus is resistant to it. You can see here that these bars, whether they were the hand, the darker orange or the light orange, which hand watered or the ebb and flood bench, did nothing. We had no control, no benefit whatsoever. We did clean grow by itself. We're looking at no benefit. What we're needing to see here is high numbers for this is the percentage of good looking roots. And I should have told you that first. What was outrageous and absolutely outrageous was to see that when we put the two together, whether it was on the ebb and flood bench or on the hand watered regular pot bench, we ended up with better control or better roots than we did with either one alone. And you know, that it's really counterintuitive to think you can take two things that don't work, put them together and they magically work. There's clearly going to be a reason for that, but I have not figured it out why this could be true. And I didn't think a lot of it until I saw some trials that Marjorie Daughtry had done that was very similar. She also had a Pythium strain that was resistant to SubduMax. And in this case, we're again wanting to see tall bars to see the quality. And she looked at the product, SubduMax here at a half. You can see it really didn't work. It was, you know, not that great. And then we start looking at what happens when we add the clean grow or uptake to it. And we have the best roots in the trial. And that looks suspiciously like the trial I did. And we were not using the same plant or the same Pythium. We just knew that it was resistant to SubduMax. So there are cases in which it's not just acting as an adjuvant, it's acting as its own little killer, doing a job for you as a fungicide, even though it might be sold to you as an adjuvant or an additive of some sort. The most recent trial, which is I think what got WinField interested in maybe trying to share some results with you guys today, was one that we completed in the last month. In this particular case, I knew that I had, once again, Pythium that was resistant to SubduMax. And if you don't think that's common, you need to just start looking at all the times when it gets reported, because it's very common these days to have that. In this case, we're looking at percentage of the roots that look good. So 64% for the non-inoculated, 7%. These plants were really clobbered. They look terrible. And Segway, oh, doing a pretty nice job. SubduMax, not doing a nice job at all. But the 38 Special by itself was far, far better than the inoculated control. You can see it as a 40 versus the inoculated control being a 7. And in this particular case, it really was of no benefit whatsoever to add the 38 Special to the SubduMax. But this is just looking at root growth. Let's look at the top growth, because that tells another picture. In this case, the taller the bars we would like, the better. The Segway O, excellent plants in the trial, as good as not giving them Pythium. So was 38 Special. Every bit as good as an industry standard, which is the Segway O. In addition to that, we saw that SubduMax did a little bit here, but it wasn't very good. When we added the two together, we didn't see a benefit. So adding them in this case actually didn't make as much sense for this particular pathogen as it did for just looking at what 38 Special was able to do on its own for Pythium control. And what that leads to is I'm going to give you a real quick summary of how confusing all of this stuff is. And then I'm going to try and make it less confusing at the end. We found over the years, doing a lot of work with Cymatric, which was a product that Alcatrols had for quite a while, a media surfactant, media wetting agent. And what we found was that in some cases, you could add it to products and get better control. You see here on this side, and you guys can get a copy of this. I believe if WinField isn't going to be able to do it, I'll send you a PDF, whatever you'd like. But we saw that for diseases that required a product to stay where it was not a good idea to add Cymatric because it moved it. We saw that with SubduMax, if you actually move it away or out of the range that it moves already, and it's extremely mobile already, you can move it right out of the pot. If you take a product that's a contact, like Medallion is just contact. Heritage is highly systemic. You start moving things that are not supposed to be moved. Like if you took Heritage and moved it away from the stems, you're potentially not going to have as good a control. So it really depends a great deal on where is the fungus. Is it in the stem, the lower stem, or is it really a true root rot, or is it like Fusarium wilt that's actually in the plant? So it's not an easy answer on this one. So adjuvants for root diseases, that one is another maybe. Maybe it's worthwhile, maybe it isn't. It's hard to predict unless it's for resistance management. If you take something like the Clean Grow and also like 38 Special, even though they have nothing in common chemically, they both actually do a pretty fine job of controlling Pythium by themselves. So if they control Pythium by themselves, then you could add it to another fungicide and have resistance management. The actual predominance of resistance in Subdue Max is reasonably high. So it is something to consider adding one of those two to a Subdue Max drench if you're going to still use that. The next one, so if the product gives control by itself, then it makes a good idea to look at it as part of a good disease management program. And the next one, which is probably the most important, it's one of the things that the 38 Special can do, is does the product trigger a host response? This is what you hear periodically in talks the pathologists refer to as an SAR, or systemic acquired resistance. Even though I think they changed that again, but it's basically, it's triggering the plant to do its own resistance. And we know for a fact that products in the same group as 38 Special have been proven to do that. Other products that do that in other ways are things like Root Shield and some of the biocontrols. So if they do that by themselves, then absolutely you would have a good shot of getting the benefit from adding them to a fungicide. So let me go to the next thing. One of the series of questions, there were a lot of good questions about how to use 38 Special and all the different testing that might have been done. And I just showed you everything I know about it, so not a whole lot, but we do know a lot about what other phosphonates do. They've been around for a good 40 years. It was one of the first things, Alliet was one of the first things that I worked on when I started at University of Florida. And I'm going to give you a review of what the phosphonates are known to do. And it turns out that controlling Pythium isn't one of their best things, but we can see that it certainly works. The best things that these products do are against Phytophthora and downy mildew. They should be considered prime rotators or additions to any control program for Phytophthora powdery mildew. I'm showing you here a trial that Mary Hosbeck did at Michigan State University. The two different tests, but what you can see is that we've got industry standards, which would be like Stature and Subdue Max. The lower the bars, the better. And Alliet, it definitely is as good, and here it's been used at a pretty high rate. It's as good as industry standards for this Phytophthora on vincas. Another set of trials that she did on snapdragon. So it's a different kind of Phytophthora. Again, a rating of 1 is going to be no disease. Subdue Max doing a really good job in 2 trials. Truban failing completely. And here's Alliet. Really good. So absolutely comparable to the best Phytophthora compounds. Now, Marjorie Daughtry also has done trials, and I'm going to show you a number of other products that are just in these categories. We've got Phyton 27 doing pretty good on this stem rot on poinsettias caused by Phytophthora. Heritage, 100% effective. Stature, 100% effective. And another phosphonate, again, that's the general group that 38 Specials in, 100% effective. Another couple of trials here. This case, I wanted to, because I see some of the questions that came up were from people growing tropicals. I want you to realize that we're getting the same kind of control. Rating of 1 here is no disease at all, none. So everywhere from Subdue, Banrot, Terrazol, and Segway, really good control. And here's Alliet right there with them. Absolutely no doubt that it is very effective on many types of Phytophthora diseases. I also mentioned downy mildew. Alliet group, things like 38 Special, Fortress, Vital, and just a myriad of other products that had been in the past out there. These things can be really good. You can see here that all the products worked about the same as the fence stop. Vital at this higher rate was actually a little bit better. Another downy mildew trial. Same kind of idea here, except in this case, we've got a product that's not registered as a fungicide. This is Nutrifite, but it's absolutely effective on this downy mildew on pansies. And you see Alliette again, just as good as one of the standard chemicals, Stature, for downy mildew prevention. And finally, Allude, Alliette, Fortress, 3 different ones in that broad group called phosphonates, and doing very well. So main things, just one more trial on roses, same thing. It's just, this is always the case when you start looking at downy mildew and Phytophthora control. So primary targets, absolutely primary targets for something in this group would be the phosphonates, Phytophthora, downy mildew, and to a lesser degree Pythium. And the only reason I'm saying lesser is that it's not as reliable. You can get excellent control on Pythium and sometimes you won't, but you almost always will get excellent control for Phytophthora diseases and downy mildews. But that's not the end of the story. Phosphonates were worked on a long time, and I think originally in Australia. Tremendous amount of the original work in the late 70s and 80s came out of there. What they found were some very, very interesting things. In other words, because they actually cause the plant's immune system to kick into gear, you can get control of quite a few other things sometimes. Here's a trial that we did trying to eradicate rose powdery mildew. Piperon was for a very long time considered the best eradicant you could get. And here we did get some reduction, but it wasn't brilliant. But the Fortress and the Alliette, both phosphonates, also were somewhat effective on powdery mildew. The other one that I wanted to show you are a couple of trials on the bacterial diseases. I spent 7 years and a tremendous amount of Ron Poulenc's money looking at Alliette for bacterial disease control. And my summary is not the same as theirs, needless to say, but you do get some good control. So at one point I had enough people asking me in California, could you use something else like Allude or Vital being in that phosphonate group? Would they give you as good a control as Alliette? And this base data basically says, yeah, and it's pretty similar to Coside. So one other trial we did, this is a different Xanthomonas on ranunculus. In this particular one, a couple of coppers, here's xylitol. Mimic was another phosphonate. So yeah, it's doing the same. And I'll tell you one good thing about it. None of the phosphonates that I'm aware of have low pH that Alliette does. If you have a low pH from spraying Alliette or Eureka, and you come in with a copper, you have a real good chance of having copper toxicity just because of the low pH. You will not see that with the other phosphonates because their pHs essentially are 6, 5, and 7 in that range. So you actually don't see any problem with alternating with copper or any other of the heavy metal products. So primary targets were Phytophthora, downy mildew, and Pythium. Secondary targets, yeah, you're going to get some benefits on powdery mildew and some of the bacterial leaf spots. So maybe I should look and see if there are any questions specifically about those things. All right, so I see one question. Do they all have the same efficacy? It is, I don't think I can answer that because I haven't tested them all. How about that? There's not one of them that rose much higher than the others in the few trials that we did where they were all together. I would say that to a large degree, they're roughly the same from what I can tell. And because it might be that one product would work the best on your particular crop and disease, it doesn't mean it worked the best on the next one. So it's a matter of looking at the group as a whole, in my opinion, and then checking labels and seeing which ones work the best for you. So, but I still got another question. I'm trying to make sense of this little screen here. Anybody else got, and the other thing to say, I know I got some other questions from you ahead of time, and that's helpful. It is going to lead to some specific research with WinField, I'm sure, next year. But it also tells me what else you're interested in. And since we're getting to the time of year when we'll see if we can manage to find out what to do next year, then hopefully I'll be able to do some work on some of those other topics that you guys had questions on. So Adam, you got anything you want to?
No, I think that covers it. I know we covered a lot of the questions that have been asked in your presentation. So individually they may not have been asked, but you're paying attention, you got them answered. And then, like I said, we appreciate you coming out and doing all that research for us. We look for more here in the coming next year or so.
Yeah, really interesting. Let me put one thing up here for the heck of it, if I can get it to open. I'm going to type for you what these words, I'm saying phosphorus acid, that equals phosphonate, okay? That is not the same as phosphoric acid or phosphorus, all right? You know what a difference in all these things are. This is what you care about, that one right there. All right, that's the one. They do not have, according to the nutritionist, they do not have any kind of benefit for the plant nutritionally. They are not going to change the pH. Their pH is not like an acid, even though they're called phosphorus acids. And this phosphonate name is used that way too. And then phosphorus is our nutrient. So you have to be super careful if you're going to read labels to get the right one. This is the one you want. All right. That's it. Make sure it's spelled right like that. I see another question. Let me.
And Essa, are the attendees able to ask questions verbally as well?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I would have to unmute them, so they would need to raise their hand if they have a question or.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a hand raised and I can allow that one to come through. Go ahead.
Are you hearing anything, Adam?
I haven't heard a question. No. If you had raised your hand looking for a question, I think you're unmuted. You're able to ask it now.
Yeah, we just need you to raise your hand and I can go ahead and unmute you.
Well, until that gets done, I would suggest to you honestly that you're asking a very complicated question about how you would use 38 special in a spring bedding program. And I think that's something that the technical sales guys at WinField would be better at answering. They do have me basically on retainer to answer specific questions on diseases. So if you have one of those, you can definitely run that by your WinField technical guy and I'll hear about it and be able to help. But I don't know what to say to a general program. I don't have general programs. Everything I do is custom.
All right. So any more hands raised there, Essa?
Nope, I'm not seeing any other hands.
Awesome. Well, I guess we can wrap it up and appreciate everybody for attending. And Ann, I appreciate all your work. Look for more research going forward. And here again, don't forget that Gravity 38 special deal with the $25 gift card for every case. And you'll get June terms on that as well. So reach out to your sales rep if you guys are interested in using that, put it into practice, and maybe supply some research back to us as well. So we appreciate everything. All right. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you very much, Adam. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you.